the hesitancy to act is as big a risk, even though we're paying more attention of the hesitancy to act too fast and the risks associated with that.
Welcome to the /podcast, where we lean into the future of IT by inviting fellow thought leaders, innovators, and problem solvers to slash through its complexity. I'm your host, James Carman, and today we're talking to Todd James. Todd James studied math and computer science, very much like me, another crazy person, at the Coast Guard Academy, which is not the usual origin story for someone who ends up running AI for a Fortune 25 retailer, but that's where he landed. Chief Data and Technology Officer at 8451 and Head of AI at Kroger. He now runs Aurora Insights, and his thesis is blunt. Most AI efforts stall not because the tech disappoints, but because leadership can't scale past the first pilot. Todd, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here. Nice talking to you today, James. Thanks for having me.
All right, so I got to get into that thesis, but first I want to hear about the Coast Guard Academy. I don't know that I've met anyone ever that went to the Coast Guard Academy. How did you end up doing that?
Yeah, it was interesting. I didn't know much about the Coast Guard Academy growing up, but I knew I needed money for college. And I look back, I think my dad's guidance was get a scholarship or join the military. And with the academies, I found a way to do both. So I was coming down to their Navy, and the more I learned about the Coast Guard, its mission, I went into it. But yeah, it's smaller than West Point and the Naval Academy. It's only about 1,000 cadets, and it's up in New London, Connecticut. But it was, still have great friends, and it opened up a really, really exciting career and some interesting sea stories that came with it. So, yeah, good place to. We used to say it was not a great place to be, but a great place to be from. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Like I see those, like, those videos of the ships out there and the big waves crashing over them and everything, and that's where they send you all to go, like, save those people. And I'm like, that's crazy. I couldn't do that. We'll have to hear about some of those stories sometime. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so the thesis, AI efforts are stalling. It's not a technology problem. It's a leadership problem. They can't scale past the first pilot. Tell me more about that thesis.
Yeah, I think the data supports it. There was some data that came out towards the tail end of last year, and I think the general gist and early this year and several sources, and it kind of coincided, right? It's, we've seen a big material increase, in the amount of companies that say they're using AI. You go back to 2023, it was about, I think it was right around 50%, maybe 55%. But at the end of last year, about 90% of companies, and you're like, hey, that's fantastic. This AI journey, we're finally there. 90% of the companies are using it. But when you get beneath the numbers, you see a pretty interesting trend. And one of which is, and this is based on data bias to large enterprises. As you get down into mid-market and below, the data gets even a little bit tougher. But about 40% saying we're seeing some value. But the real challenge is, when you get below that, some value is different than enterprise value that actually allows you to transform the business. And we look at it across large companies, only about 6% of companies are getting 5% more EBIT contribution through their AI investments. And those that are seeing material benefits. And when you normalize out things like industry and company size and where they are in the world, you start to realize that there's a pretty material lift in total shareholder return for those companies that are leading. One source said, just south of 2x higher revenue growth. So you're seeing an increasing and compounding advantage for those companies that are getting ahead, but it's just a small percentage. So that's kind of the scenario and the situation that we're seeing today. And the unfortunate thing, and then I'll maybe we could take the discussion a different way, but by not moving here, companies are putting themselves at pretty big risk of being disrupted from the outside. And I think, that has an impact on companies, it has an impact on shareholders or owners, and it has an impact on employees, directly in employees' lives and people's lives that can be pretty disruptive.
Yeah, I mean, you and I, we met at Cincy AI Week, had a great conversation. I gave a
Yeah.
keynote there, and I talked about this kind of that lack of ROI. You're right; some people are seeing some value, but I think the keynote was really kind of a reassuring message that I was saying. Is kind of talking about that J curve, where yes, you're going to see maybe even like decline in productivity gains, or decline in productivity as you go down through that dip in that J, and that's because you're making those complementary investments. The things that you need to kind of iron out in order for this stuff to take off, but then as you make those investments and get to the other side, that's where you're going to see it. I think a lot of the folks are just squarely in that dip, that little curve at the bottom of the J.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's an argument that you can be optimistic about it, but we've been doing artificial intelligence for on an enterprise scale now for over a decade. And I know that people say you go back to the 50s and Turing, but when machine
Sure.
learning came and we started to really industrialize some of that, and as well as some of the advanced stats, we've been doing this for a while.
Mhm.
I used to describe it as when you start your AI journey, yes, you start small. You start with a pilot, and the results are kind of ho hum. And then, if you stay at it, they should be exciting, and they should be meaningful, and they should be nonlinear. And the challenge we're seeing is a lot of companies have been doing this for a few years, and it's still hum, right?
Mhm.
And what you're seeing when you recognize it is you're seeing pilots that are coming out of technology without business sponsorship. You see people coming together in a room and coming up with the most interesting use cases, disassociated from the P&L, which we should talk about more in depth about starting with the P&L. You find that they're not building for scale as they look to deploy, and as a result, you're seeing these organizations that aren't really getting value from it. I've sat through discussions with CEOs where they bring their CIO on and they start talking about their AI plan. There is no mention qualitatively or quantitatively across a multi-year plan of value or performance improvement expectations. And I'm trying to think, and I see your face here, James. You see it in the
Yeah.
market too. I'm
Yeah.
I'm trying to think across my career, any investment, capital investment that we've ever made in business where you don't have clear line of sight and accountability for ownership of those outcomes. So I do think part of the big challenge here is we're pushing technology for technology's sake, and we've gotten away from some core business fundamentals. Like, if you're going to make an investment, you should see a return, and someone should be held accountable for that return. And for some reason in AI, it's a lot of experimentation and ability to go back to tell your board, to tell your owners, to tell the fund, if you're private equity, that we're doing AI. There's so much pressure to do that, but it's not necessarily connected to a real value plan.
And I'm sure, Aurora Insights, that's a lot of the work you're doing is helping coach folks and guide them through those challenges. Do you feel like the market is kind of taking a turn, and people are getting a little fed up with or disenfranchised with the experimentation stuff, and they're starting to see the light of like,
Yeah,
we really got to, maybe we should make some money off of this stuff we're investing in?
there's two vectors I'll look at this. We'll come back to basic human dynamics, but let's start from a business angle. And from a business angle, yes, you're seeing uh, uh, boards put more pressure on the business to be able to do it from a competitive and a return perspective. Although a small number of boards, when you talk to them, can actually articulate what is the plan to get there. But I think around the frustration, I've spent time over the last year with the capital markets community, some of the research groups, and the questions that I've been working with them around is how do you determine how do you translate a CEO's earnings call claims around AI into understanding whether there's actual proof around it? And what you're seeing on these earning calls is increasing pressure. The investment community is looking beyond. They talked about AI to where can I see it in the P&L? How is it showing up? And how do I have confidence in their ability to deliver? So across public markets, I think we're seeing an increasing level of pressure that's coming from the investors, translating into the fiduciary accountability of the boards and them putting pressure there. So we are seeing that tilt. I'm seeing and hearing individual CEOs who will call up and say, look, I've been investing in this, but I'm not seeing value. So I do think there's a shift. I think as you go where you're playing in the market, it differs based on the type of the company, the size of the company, the industry. So there's still, as I would call, a lot of arbitrage across the market around the sense of urgency, the preparedness to move there. The other thing that's interesting, and I've seen it, and it's funny. I was in a meeting in New York City, I think 2 months ago, and I was with a group of CEOs at a large fund, and we were talking about AI and the nature to go in there. And one of the things that kind of popped in that discussion is not universally, but you could see a legitimate concern uh, and uncertainty. And one of the people after the discussion kind of translated it into fear. They've seen fear. I think there is a fear of the unknown. If you hear people have invested and they're not getting returned, your company needs it, but you don't necessarily understand what it is. So do I lean in on this, or am I looking just to make it to the next round? It kind of reminds me, I used to work right after I got out of the military with the Army as one of my clients as a consultant. And I remember a gentleman telling me as I was trying to talk strategy with him, he said, look, Todd, you can't look down range when you're in the 5 meter knife fight. And I think a lot of these CEOs right now are in that 5 meter knife fight. And it's a big risk to move into this area, which is creating drag. But we all know in business, if you don't address a problem, if you don't take advantage of a capability, it doesn't go away, and it's going to impact you one way or the other. So, the hesitancy to act is as big a risk, even though we're paying more attention of the hesitancy to act too fast and the risks associated with that. I think it's going to catch a lot of these companies up.
Something interesting as you were talking about, like the recent earnings calls and stuff. I think like X and SpaceX and those folks, they're making a lot of capital investments, and a lot of those stocks took it on the chin a little bit because the investors are like, wait a minute, come on, man, you're giving all our money away to these data centers and stuff like that. Is that a lab only phenomenon, or are we going to see capital investments like those big chunks coming out of returns for these other stocks, outside of the labs? Is that just for the labs?
Well, I think right now we've seen a lot of investment. You've seen a little bit of slowdown in the market I'm always careful with the market because slowdown today could be a buying opportunity tomorrow. With some of the larger technology stocks. I think what we have to be careful with is probably two things come to mind for me just from experience. One of which is this is a fundamental transformation, similar to what we saw at the turn of the century, where people started using electric power to recreate how they think about manufactured goods and assembly lines, and going from factories that were built near streams with a single what are those things that turn a single
the pulley systems and the axles
the
and
gear
everything.
apparatus, and now they could say with electricity we can do a lot of things on cheaper land and a flat plot, and making those shifts and making those investments. And I think that comes to mind around, if you kind of view that, there's a lot more runway from a investment window perspective around what's happening with these labs and the upward potential for continued advances in consumption. I mean, what's the upper bound on more intelligence? And I know it's prediction, right? It's prediction that is providing recommendations and predictions of future, but let's just call it intelligence. What's the upper bound on that? I think that's a question we all have a hard time answering, because theoretically it's nothing. Now, the flip side, we go back, and you probably remember this. Remember all the fiber build out? Hey,
Mm-hmm.
once again, a major shift. We're going from, and if you weren't around then, we were going from a localized network computers to kind of opening up the internet and e-commerce starting to drive and more traffic. And where are we going to put it? So we need to build bigger pipes. And then if you were in a city that had a lot of these telecoms, you remember the absolute reckoning that happened and the amount of companies that disappeared, the amount of workforce that was freed up for other opportunities, which is a nice way of saying,
That's a very nice way
man,
to
that,
put it.
that was that was hard to watch your neighbors go through that back in the day. So I think we've got to balance that. But I do think right now I am personally bullish on the, over time, not the day-to-day cycles, year-to-year cycles, but this is fundamentally transformational. The other thing we need to look at too is I I tend to look and say, don't just look at the models in the frontier lab. The opportunities beneath that are significant. The infrastructure capability, going back to the what is it, 100 miles of copper on a GPU, and it goes up and down. But think a run-of-the-mill high-end GPU, about 100 miles of copper. So you start with the minerals, you look at the rare earths. So you have that capacity that needs to build out to support it. You have the power for the data centers. You have the data centers themselves. You have the infrastructure companies that are fueling the models. So I think you need to look across the entire value chain. In the near term, if you were to ask me, there's probably some opportunity more in the infrastructure that
Mm-hmm.
still needs to be built out to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, too, you know, I'm not your investment advisor. I worked at Fidelity for 15 years. Call them. It's a great company.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of all over the place because you got so many things we can talk about. But one unique, I think, experience that you have that a lot of folks don't is, as you said, we've been doing AI for a long time, and you've been in it, and you worked for 8451. For those folks who don't know, and maybe you can explain it better than I can. I'll just give my kind of layman's definition of what they do. But they kind of take customer data and do customer analytics. They're kind of an offshoot of Kroger that they do that customer analytics work using artificial intelligence, machine learning, and whatnot for Kroger specifically. That's the gist of it. You may have a
Yeah,
deeper insight.
that's a great way. I think if you go to 8451's website, they are a retail media insights and data science company that is fueled by the Kroger data asset. And, basically it takes data from Kroger and, based on, a customer data asset and data associated with the operations. And it monetizes. It has an insights business that helps companies like your major brands understand the path to purchase. It has a retail media business, which just retail media. When you're looking at retail, margins are about 3 to 4%. Grocery
Mm-hmm.
retail about 1 to 2. Retail media, depending on how you execute, can be like 40 to 70%. So these are higher margin businesses. And then they have some other things. Venture. They have a venture capital arm that they use some of the data science for. But it's basically taking that data and traffic data from Kroger and returning profit and more traffic back to Kroger is how that flywheel works. And you're seeing it across retail. And to be honest, that's probably a longer discussion.
Mm-hmm.
These new profit opportunities across companies, and I've seen it in legacy media and have had some discussions there, where you have a rich data asset and a business model that's being commoditized, and you have an opportunity to create new profit streams that operate at a much greater scale and a much greater profit margin that enables you to do new things than what you're doing today. And I think companies need to start thinking that way as well as they look at artificial intelligence, not just how I can improve today, but how does an enriched data asset and an analytic capability allow me to open new profit streams that are adjacent to my current business, but also complementary, and create a new economic structure for my company.
Yeah, and your background. So the unique aspect for me, your perspective So you worked for 8451 and you're, kind of head of AI for Kroger. But when you were doing that AI, the nature of what you were doing is a fundamental difference from what people are trying to do today with this generative AI and language models. The models that you were using for, that analytics you were doing were purpose built for that data. They were trained. You can measure, are they doing a good job or not? With these language models, they're predictive of, auto-regressive. They spit out the next token. Okay, that looks like that's roughly right. And then they're trying to generalize this language generation to all these different problems where it's like you can't really measure. Is it doing the thing exactly like I want it to,
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about that for whatever reason this morning before the call. I look back across what I'm seeing in the market now, but from leading AI at places like Fidelity and then at Kroger. And what I can tell you is generative AI that is, now available through these models. The places where I saw them delivering meaningful EBITDA type improvement was when they were used in combination with some other form of predictive or optimization science. A few exceptions with some of the paired programming, the co-pilot programming. I've seen examples and I've taken budget bets on those that prove to be accurate where you're, kind of dampening some of your growth projections for what you would need in the future around engineering.
Mm-hmm.
But around the programming, I've seen some benefits when you're able to manage them and you're able to do them in a highly measurable shop like IT. But one of the biggest mistakes that I keep seeing, and I see it in companies, I also see it in private equity funds, like in those operating groups sometimes, where the idea is we are going to deploy chatbot and copilot and we're going to get benefits. And you're like, well, where are you going to deploy it? And how are you going to measure it? What are you going to do? Well, it'll make finance faster. So how much faster? And it goes back to that. You're making an investment without a budget bet. Yeah, you're making individual people's jobs easier. And I think that's fantastic. But if you're going to do that, call the moment. It's like I'm buying them Excel so they don't have to use green graph paper.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
Cool. Call the moment. But if you're doing it around value, you need to be able to measure it. You need to be able to look and say, where are their targeted opportunities? And you usually need to make some investment in it to structure it so that it's more useful than what you're just getting from a frontier lab. And over time, probably if it's valuable, probably want to find a model that's a bit cheaper. But this idea of democratization, I'm going to get savings without any kind of tracking and measurement, or I'm going to get increased revenue and benefits. Where have we ever received value without measuring it? And I've heard it called the leaky bucket. I made an investment here, but I'm not seeing it. Where's the value going? I'm sure there's value. There's more efficient. Well, maybe they're doing something else. Maybe they're covering up another problem that the company should be focused on fixing.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're more efficient, they're able to spend more time there. Maybe they're playing on their phone. I want to be optimistic, but it doesn't matter which of those are, from playing solitaire, which I hear I play too much on my phone in the evening, so I got to stop that. Or they're actually going and fixing a real world problem or developing something. You still have to know how much time's freed up so that you're putting the right strategic focus behind where you should be reallocating it.
Yeah, because if you free people up and all they're doing is going and doing non-value added stuff with all that free time, that doesn't help anything.
It doesn't help. And I would even say, what if they're doing value added on something that is becoming increasingly inefficient?
Yeah.
But you're not seeing that problem. You're not seeing the benefit because they're going over to fix this other fire. Well, you want to know where they're going and you want to know how much of their time is there so that you can actually say, hey, we should fix this fire. That's a big risk too that I've seen.
Now, do you think, I don't know, I've got like ideas swirling in my head around this and I can't come back to this. Right now, all the businesses are just kind of trying to general purpose leverage this AI thing, specifically generative AI. And it's, I think we see it because I've called it, what did I call it in the past? I called it the Papal paradox. So, my grandfather would have known about generative AI before a CEO does in the boardroom. Way back in the day, we had Chat GPT in our hands. It was on our phones, and people were playing around with it and like, "Oh, tell me a joke," those sort of things. So that it was exposed to like the normies, the people out in the public first before it kind of made its way into business. And so it's catching on, it's catching fire, and then now we're like, okay, we got to apply this to business. And I guess what I'm swirling around here is, do you think we'll get back to kind of what would be considered traditional AI, where we're realizing, okay, these general purpose things, they're great and everything, but I really need some predictability. I need this to be purpose built. I need to do a purpose built model for the thing that I'm looking to do, because all of this non-determinism is just janky.
Yeah, I think there's two things we'll see. People have been doing AI, using AI. I've heard one term, AIing it. And you go back to the stats and you're not seeing the value. I think when we say, we'll talk purpose-built, and then I'll also talk about commoditized. I think for companies where a commercial solution isn't a real good fit, or where it's proprietary, you're going to see organizations lean in and build competitively differentiating solutions. And what I would say is, the good ones are going to look at their P&L. They're going to understand for each core area of the P&L within their business what economic drivers AI can actually influence. And then they're going to find the high density workflows, or the high value, high risk workflows within that are impacted by those levers. And they're going to build out solutions. And that's what we've been, the companies that are seeing value, that's what we've been doing for the last 10 years. Without generative AI, with generative AI, with a commoditized capability of generative AI through the Frontier Labs, that has been the approach to value. And I don't see that changing. And as pressure goes on, we'll see some of that discipline return, or we'll see the companies that don't have that discipline no longer be a factor, and the ones that do are taking space in the market by doing those solutions, right? Because at the end of the day, I mean, it's just simple, right? Since the 50s, we've been doing process optimization and improvement based on Deming and Duran, Lean, Six Sigma. In the 70s, we started automating those things that we could automate, that were yes, no, deterministic decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And what was left? What was left was individuals, customers, or employees making judgment decisions. That's the value pool, making the customers more seamless journey so that they can have a bigger impact, or making your associates more efficient and reducing friction from their workflows so that they can have a bigger impact and grow as you scale. Those are the two pools, and the companies are going to have to, those pools and companies, you have to look around and see where they're at. Where are the high density workflows? Where do we have data to go after it? When they see that, you realize it's a pretty meaningful opportunity to drive more value through those areas. So I think companies are going to start to lean in. Like I say, it's about the P&L, understanding it for your company, understanding enough about AI to know what value levers can improve the P&L. And then for those value levels, what are those high density, high value workflows that you want to impact? So that's thing one. So that's kind of where they're going to go. Thing two, and there was a $6.5 billion investment by Anthropic and OpenAI separately earlier in the year around forward deployed engineers and consultants.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of hypotheses of why that's happening. But clearly, if you get a critical mass of effectively deployed forward engineers and consultants with expertise in how to solve business problems with your Frontier Lab models, you should be able to drive up utilization of those models pretty significantly. But you should also be able to start to accelerate the pace of change in the market around AI enablement of process flows, both on the customer and the associate side, right? You can see a scenario where if you were one of these Frontier Labs, you have the forward deployed engineers, you start crosswalking private equity firms and improving all the finance processes and become finance as a service, right? So I think there's a lot of finance as a service at some level. I'm not saying the whole finance group, but I'm saying you could start to create non-competitively differentiated patterns where the intelligence begins to get serviced. It's much more accessible. And I think we're going to start seeing that on more of a commoditized basis across the market as well.
Yeah, the forward deployed engineer, I think that absolutely scratches an itch that the market has right now of them, kind of not understanding that art of the possible and having people that can come in, look at processes and say, how about we rethink this? What if we take a step back? Let's approach it in an AI native fashion, not just as you were pointing out, like the electrification era. Like we had factories which had pulleys with steam engines attached to them, and all we did was we said, okay, let's get rid of the steam engine, let's put an electric engine on that. We didn't change anything else until later we figured out, wait, let's put electric motors on all of the machines, and then we can move them around wherever we want. It's that idea of like let's rethink this and reorganize how we work and all those things. I think forward deployed engineers, I agree. I think they're, as these patterns get more well known, because we're building things and experimenting and learning, and there'll be standards and all of that developing over time, I think it's absolutely going to explode even more.
It's good. I think it's an accelerate if deployed effectively. And there are others, right? You've got everyone out there, other consultants, other firms that are looking to do it. But I think that investment could be it's a signal you shouldn't ignore, and it could be a real accelerator. The other thing too, you got to keep in mind, with acceleration, increases the pace of your absorption of risk. There are places where if you're a CEO or a CIO in a company right now and you're thinking about this, you should be really excited because it could probably help your organization get expertise and capability that you may not have and accelerate. But you also better be thinking about what you own and what you don't let them touch. There are IP considerations associated with how these models work that go beyond, are they sharing my data? That for competitive proprietary processes, that's probably not your best path if you're looking at the viability of your business in perpetuity.
Yeah, and I'm not saying they did it, but, Anthropic partnered with Figma. They had someone from Anthropic on the board of Figma, and then all of a sudden Anthropic has Claude Design come out, and then Figma stock goes, so there's murmurings.
There's stories out there. What I would say, though, even if you look at how the models work and you assume goodwill,
sure,
integrity, there's still IP risk that you got to be careful about.
Yeah.
So if you're leaning in and don't know what you're doing there, you may be fast and better today and competitively compromised tomorrow.
Yeah, and then there's also the, it's compromised, but it's also, how do you differentiate if everybody's using the same models to make the same decisions over and over, and everybody's relying on that? There's no IP.
That's it. Like here, what I would say, like accounts payable, most companies aren't differentiating on accounts payable. So if you have if that pattern starts to get really well understood within the frontier model landscape and go from one to the other, I'd plug into it. I'd use it. I'd take it.
Sure.
But your process for developing new products at a pharmaceutical company, your process for understanding your customer at a retailer, your process for creating better personalized experiences in your competitor, those are the kind of things that I would be very wary of exposing to that ecosystem.
Yeah. We assume that everybody's playing above board right now, but there's a risk.
Here's the good news: if you're a CEO, you're a CIO, whether people are acting with good intent or malintent, however you want to look at it, the risks are there, and they're your risks to own.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how you walk through those, how you assess them, and the decisions you make doesn't really matter what's happening in the background. The decision set's the same for you.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned and I know you're working with companies. You're not, with your work that you're doing at Aurora, you're not necessarily in one industry per se. So you kind of work across industries.
Which is, I'm having a ball, dude.
Yeah, I bet you are, man. I bet you're having a blast, man.
Reminds me of my Deloitte days. That is pretty cool. Yes. But I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
that's fun.
We're going to talk about that in a minute. About going out of enterprise and into your own world. That's got to be fun and really cool. But anyway, what I was wondering is, are you seeing any patterns from an industry standpoint? Where are some industries excelling and really leaning in and getting a lot of the bang for the buck, and others where they're not? Are there any patterns kind of emerging there?
Yeah, I'd say it's tough to do the industry, but what I would say, we'll start with the industry, then I'll get into the patterns that I think probably matter more. Because within industry, you go down far enough in the market and everything I'm about to say starts to break. But what I would say from an industry perspective, where I'm seeing it in areas where uh, data is either highly valuable or you have high velocity, high volume data. So I think, and I don't think this has changed, but historically, the highest value, monetary value per unit data, it's been in healthcare.
Mm.
So, there's an economic return. Coming from financial services into retail, when I moved over to Kroger, uh, the I was I heard about it, I knew about it, but until you get there, you don't understand it. The velocity and the volume of data in retail is incredible. So that's a great example, I think, where you're seeing a lot of movement and you're seeing a lot of action around retail, because you've got a very, in the healthcare, you've got data rich environment in terms of the data is really rich in monetary terms, to data rich environment to we can do a lot with it. And, when you've got a lot of, using my Coast Guard, when you've got a lot of water going at fast pace current against the rudder, it's easier to turn the ship. And then you can do a lot of neat things. It's the same with data. So I think retail works there. The other area we've seen, financial services generally have such big margins that they can do a lot of investment and they can do a lot of strategic investment. So they're always interesting as well. I mean, that's an industry where you have a little bit of an opportunity to say, I want to drive value now, but I also want to figure out how can I look at something to change the industry entirely in 3 years. And you see a little bit more of that flexibility. So those are probably the three industries. Probably the fourth one you would look at, obviously, what's happening in defense. And we saw it with the trends that were happening in the Armenian-Azerbaijan war, and how some of the traditional thoughts changed there to what's happening in with the Israel and Palestine situation. And then clearly in Ukraine, I think it was last week, Wall Street Journal reported a story out there about how a U.S. Unit went up against the Ukrainian drone operators, and it's a bit of a learning experience. And the nature of AI and the nature of these new technologies is changing pretty rapidly. So that would be the other industry. Now here's the thing, though. We talk industries. For me, what I'm seeing around patterns, the patterns that I'm seeing don't work is, let's figure out how just to deploy frontier lab models without a broader lens on full AI capabilities and without business cases. So back to that example of, you go in, you see a roadmap, it's on a great slide. It's got multiple years and there's absolutely no value associated with it, or even operating improvements. I'll give you credit, say we haven't figured out the dollar yet, but we know it impacts this lever, and this is our big lever in the manufacturing environment. I go, okay, probably worth a try. But when you're not even doing that, that is a pattern that I see across portfolio companies and funds, but I'm also seeing out in the market, especially as you go down to the mid market, where there's pressure to act, but really not as much of a capability to act on your own there. So that's kind of the other side of virtuous. We'll talk a little bit about some of the virtuous patterns. The companies that are really making this work, I see four things. One is the senior leadership team is engaged.
Mm-hmm.
The companies I work with now, the C-suite's engaged, because if it's not, you're not really transforming your company. You're doing point solution projects, right? Hire a company to come in, put a point solution in place, and realize a point solution's worth of value. But where you have the C-suite involved, they're rethinking their strategies. They're rethinking how their business is structured. They're rethinking their financial and economic structure. So that's where you need the C-suite involved. And for me, it's not, do I have an AI strategy? It's when your head of supply chain, your head of financial products stands up at a board meeting and talks about AI, but they talk about it as kind of part of how they're talking about their growth plan and what they're going to achieve and how they're going to hit their metrics. Those are the companies that are really excelling, because it's embedded into what they do and they realize it's just another tool. Two, pace. They're moving fast. That risk of waiting too long can have a big implication on companies. We learned early in the Coast Guard, if you act too aggressively, you're going to get yourself in trouble. But in a treacherous sea environment, if you don't act fast enough, that's just as dangerous. The companies that have figured that out are doing better. 3, leaders start with the economics, and we've talked about how you look at the P&L first. And then 4, you build for scale. It's the mindset. I love when an operations group gets involved because they understand that these solutions need to scale. Whereas I think some of the analytical background, the mathematical, isn't as oriented to scale. But when you take that mindset of how do I industrialize this capability, make it reusable, make it monitorable, make it so that I can drive this in high volume and velocity in a way that's controlled and valuable and measured across the organization, those are the organizations that are seeing value, right? Because it's about, at the end of the day, an individual algo is going to impact a decision point. Transformation happens when you impact all the decision points. That's what we're trying to do. Activate them or better inform them through data. That's the aspiration.
Perspective. So one of the things happening with AI is, in the past, a lot of us, I'll just call the broad term knowledge workers, right? So we would have, some thinking time. I'm actually reading the book Deep Work right now, so I'll use his phrase. So we would have like deep work time, but then it would be interleaved with kind of this more shallow work, some more mechanical things that you don't really have to kind of put your cycles on. AI is kind of taken away some of that shallow work, the menial things, the mechanical things, especially software engineering. You're not clickety-clacking on a keyboard. So you're in that more cerebral land, that time when you're having to put deep thought into things more. And people don't realize that is very exhausting. It can be, right? So how is that affecting, our outside of work? What do we do in our free time? How do we busy our mind? That sort of.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do think it's going to change the nature of how we spend our time.
Mhm.
And it's funny. I remember it was probably 20 years ago having a discussion with someone. They were in a role with a high cognitive load. And it was kind of interesting because they're a very cerebral person. And you just assume they go home and they're reading literature and they're doing things. And the response that I got is, by the time I get home, I am so exhausted mentally that I like activities like lawn mowing, gardening,
Mm.
exercising, sitting back watching a game and talking to friends. So, it's I do think as we start to see how we spend our time from a cognitive load perspective, it will change. And I find that in my own life, like a day where I'm out and I'm having a lot of conversations with people. Nothing is better for me than to come home and read a book and get into literature. And I like, I mean, my reading's not generally easy. I read philosophy. I read source materials around history. That's kind of my thing. Cool or weird, either way. But that's what I do. But on a day where it's really hard and you're trying to come up with concepts and you're working on concepts, it's the gym, it's the game, it's yard work, it's rearranging the garage. It is something where you just don't have to think. So I see it in my own life too. I actually think it could be good because I think we've become so accustomed to coming home and closing our doors. Maybe the idea of getting out there because we've had such a high cognitive load day and interacting with people would be a good thing. And to be quite honest, I talked to someone recently and she was telling me how her generation now, because of all of the high cognitive load, they all like to, I think she said knit, whatever they call it, but they're getting together to do that. And not something that, we would have talked about 20 years ago, of that being kind of a trend across a group of people.
But yeah, it's getting some outlet of more mechanical, non deep, shallow type activities where you don't have to use your brain. Yeah, all right, I like it. I do think that is a human cost that we're not really. I mean, I'm sure some people are thinking about it, but on a broad scale, I don't think we're realizing the impact of taking, as we say, we're giving people an opportunity to do more high value work that usually means thinking, cerebral type stuff for a lot of things. and taking away the mechanical, the rote things that out of our day to day. And I do think that's going to have a human toll, and we're going to have to adapt over time to
But
how do we deal with it.
it could be good though, and I'll leave you with
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
What if we spent more time having pizza on lawn chairs in the front yard with our neighbors, volunteering more at church,
Yeah.
showing up to help out at the charitable pharmacy, taking walks with friends around the neighborhood. I actually think that if we do this right, and it goes back to those knitting circles, I think community at arm's length is something that could be a very good thing for individuals and for society, especially as you see kind of how we've devolved into people pull into their garages, close the garage door, and they're out for the night and really don't know their neighbors in a lot of cases. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we would be better for it. I think it could be a nice renaissance period for humanity. And as you said, you come home, you never see your neighbors, and until you do something that makes them mad, and then you see them. Yeah, I think like for me, it's a matter of like it's a readjustment period, and we need to rethink how we do things. Because I'm one of those tinkerers. I go home and I code, right? I like to do that. But if I'm doing that all day, and then I go home and do that at night, and the way we're coding now. Man, it's just a lot of mind work. So anyway, yeah, I just thought that was an interesting thing.
I would say too, man, and we'll leave it at this. But if you're only doing one thing, you get stale. You need intellectual diversity.
Heck yeah, yeah. You got to hear about these history books. I found like I hated history in high school. I didn't want to do it, but as I get older, I'm like I'm digging it, and I want to read about the history and those sort of things, which is really. It just blows me away. It's like, what happened? Why wasn't I interested when this is what I was supposed to be
doing back then?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. So next segment on our show. So this is kind of our take on like hot or not. We call it ship it or skip it.
Ship or skip. Everybody, we got to tell us if you ship or skip.
So we'll bring up the topic and we'll talk about, hey, is this something we should be doing or something we shouldn't? We alluded to it earlier. Again, this is your world right now. You have recently left kind of a 30-year in the enterprise, whether it be consulting, full-time Fidelity and Kroger. But now you're out there on your own, kind of hanging out your shingle and doing your own thing. How is that? Is that something you would say to people? Man, I'm having such a blast. Absolutely do it if you can. This is so much fun. Or is it like, yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I would say if it's a ship it or skip it, I would say for me it was a ship it. I have wanted since I left the Coast Guard to be an entrepreneur, and I've been fortunate on two fronts. One, I married a woman whose father was an entrepreneur and fully understood the ups and downs. What it's like when you have to cut off cable to pay the electricity so you can hit payroll. And her father went on to be successful in construction and roofing and stuff. But she understood what that meant and was always kind of giving me a realistic picture of it's not all roses. And I think the other thing I was always, every time I was about ready to do it, I got a great opportunity. For me, what I would say, make sure it's something like if you're looking at this, make sure it's something that you really have your heart into. I did it realizing that you can talk about wanting to do something your whole career and never do it. What kind of person is that? So I made the jump, when I was in a very good role at Kroger, just because I knew at some point stop talking and start doing. So I'm energized to do it. I'm excited about doing it. It's something I've wanted to do for a while, and I'm committed. What I would say is it's not all roses. It's ups and downs. It's tough. It's lonely at times. You go from, running large teams, thousands of people, to all of a sudden you're the individual who has to walk in and figure out how to fix your printer.
You're the IT guy too.
Yeah, and the business development's different, right? And even when you're doing a kind of relationship based with and word of mouth and stuff, you weren't doing a lot of that inside a corporate setting. So it's a change. I would talk to a lot of people and do a lot of exploration before I did it. There's a financial aspect you should probably consider that will vary your stress levels as you're going through it. But for me, I'm learning a lot. I'm energized. Every day it's something new. I see the direct impact of the work, and I'm very passionate about it. So I'm glad where I'm at. But there are days, Trish, like the best example I had, one day Trish came in, my wife, and my head's on the desk, and she's like, which is uncharacteristic for me. And she's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I'm selling to me." And it was just an example of, I mean, you get in there and you realize, you're talking to busy people and they're all excited and they get off the call and they're like, "Let's meet again next week." And their admin calls and says, "He's not free for 4 weeks." And I remember that because that was my life. Right. And, but it's different. So that I'll leave it there, but I would say know yourself, explore it. You only get one life, so make it meaningful and make it interesting. But make sure this is what defines interesting in your life before you do it, because there will be ups and there will be downs.
Yeah. Make sure the rewarding parts are rewarding enough to get you through those head on your desk days. What about AI and, going it alone these days? You've got AI kind of as that co-pilot, that partner there with you. Does it make it easier to, the thinking partner, like a thought partner and those sort of things?
If you do it right. I think around some base activities, you can really get easier. Like
fixing your printer.
That helped. It did help. But even things like you're always researching and you're always learning. So research bots that have quality research bots that ensure provenance, then surface things up in a way that you can review and figure what's interesting, then go to the source material to validate, as opposed to spending all night Googling like we were 10 years ago. Those things are helpful. It's helpful to iterate. What I generally try to do on the things that are really important, because you can get sucked in, it can actually become a taskmaster if you're not careful. Because, keep going down, you'll get into sitting there for an hour and realize, why did I do that? My original idea was good. And, AI can start having some patterns that drive you up at a wall. And, but what I try to do is I'll use pen and paper on the things that are important. I'll put time into thought and discernment, and then I will use it for a validation. When I say validation, it's not, "Hey, what do you think?" It's, here's the market, or here's a particular opportunity. Here's what we should be checking. What are you seeing out there? Are these theses valid? Are these theses novel? Why or why not? Give me evidence. Give me proof. And then some final questions like, would you have approached it differently? And those kind of questions. But if you just start with a blank slate, then what you end up looking like is everyone else. Like and even some of the messages, you'll see them. Even some of the words, I used to love the word, the right frame. You can't use the right frame anymore, because every time I get an email from someone with the right frame, you'll get 3 or 4 a day. It's AI generated. Or patterns that, like, if you want to list out, you can't do patterns of 3 anymore. Like, it's X and Y and Z. It's got to be X and Y, or A, B, C, and D. But if it's X and Y and Z, it's AI. So, you're and what's frustrating, some of us used to write and use some of this, but I think, unfortunately, if you're just using AI for the things that really matter, it's going to be like, you're going to be the ice cream store that looks like vanilla ice cream. And vanilla is great, especially graders, as we all know.
Oh.
But you go into an ice cream store, all of us want to have exciting flavors. And if you're just using AI, you're going to struggle to have exciting flavors, using the ice cream analogy. For those of you not in Cincinnati, Graders is the best ice cream in the world. Would you?
Yes.
But yeah.
Absolutely. I cannot agree more. I think when Oprah did that, she, and I'm sure they're going to see an uptick in their sales because of our conversation,
No problem.
but like, I think Oprah said on her show one time that it was the greatest, and like they went bonkers. Like their sales went through the roof. They had to like send people, because they ship people all over the country, and it went crazy for them. And, well, I'm sure they
It's
loved it.
really good, but there is no diet in the country that allows you even a spoonful of that delicious ice cream.
Yeah, you're not on the plan. There ain't no plan that you're on unless it's like the Last Supper on death row. Like, yeah,
That'd be a
that's
good
within
place to do
bounds.
it. You wouldn't have to
Yeah,
worry.
yeah, exactly. Oh gosh, yeah, that's such good stuff. All right, what about replacing? So a lot of folks are doing this, like completely shutting down their call center, and they're just having bots take over. What do you think about that phenomenon? Is that a good thing from a customer experience standpoint, from a business?
I think it depends on what you're doing, right? And I was heavily involved in AI and call centers at Fidelity, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, one, I think it's all about customer expectations. The most important thing with your multi-channel, omni-channel, which we've been talking about for years, is meeting the customer where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
AI provides an opportunity around a lot of interactions to meet a customer where they want to be and where they're at. And I think if you target certain audiences and certain populations
Mm-hmm.
for certain types of problems, that's probably all they ever want for some, especially like tech products. Where you have to be careful is meeting the customer where they're at may in some cases go beyond a chatbot. So I'll look at financial services, status of my accounts. I forgot my password. Does my 401k plan support this option? I don't need to talk to a person. Get it to me, get it quickly, preferably without even having to pick up the phone, doing it over chat. That's great. Hey, I want to make sure that I have enough money that I'm not going to be a burden on my children in retirement. It's probably not an AI enabled answer. That is, in fact,
No.
the AI provides a great example to do and advanced mathematics to do like millions of Monte Carlo algorithms to come up with the right scenarios. But the person empathizing across becomes even more important now for some of those interactions. So I don't know if that's you said I had to do ship it or skip it. Depends on who you are, whether or not you do that. I got to stay anchored in business fundamentals. And the most important thing, meet your customer where they want to be met and use the approach that works.
Yeah, I think increasingly, a lot of the population is at the point where they don't want to talk to someone. But you can't do like the old IVR approach, press 1 to do this, press 2 to do this, then go 6 levels deep on the, to press the number thing. If you can get them to where they need to go quickly with AI, which you can. I mean, a lot of them are doing that. I agree. I think that's a better experience for people.
If you want an answer for a lot of stuff, AI is fine. But a lot of people don't always just want an answer. Sometimes they want confidence. And I don't see AI delivering confidence.
No,
and when I say that, someone looking across and saying, I get it, right? You saw what happened with your parents. You don't want that to happen to you. Those kind of, that's hard for AI to replace that.
Yeah, I think those escape hatches, a lot of companies, you see them do this. They put friction in front of those escape hatches to get out of the AI driven experience. And it's like, just give me a human being, please. Sometimes I'm just at that point, and you're like, oh, well, you can look here, or you're
pushing the button, the pound or the zero, or yelling, representative, representative.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. What about the AI industry and kind of the AI world right now is kind of framing itself. There's part of this like doom and gloom stuff. There's going to be no jobs for anyone, and there's it feels like AI's got a PR problem. How are you feeling about how the AI industry is representing itself to the country, to the world right now? Are they doing a good job, or could they do better?
To be honest, I think you look at it, I would characterize, I think there's opportunity there. I think there's low trust. There are organizations so you look at the core, like the frontier labs. I think there's concern. I think there's relatively low trust. Some of that's earned, some of it's unfair.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at general sentiment, that's probably a pretty safe statement to make. When you look at individual applications and how companies are talking about it, think of some of the advances that and some of the exciting innovations that are coming in healthcare around being able to detect patterns and get earlier to cancer prevention. Hey, we all like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We like taking less time to build our grocery lists. So I do think there are cases where it's going well. I think one area where there is tremendous need from a geopolitical future viability of our way of life that the tech community has done a horrible job, and that's around data centers. And you even look, and it's across state. You see a lot of different states um, pushing back on data center builds. In the state of Ohio, large, diverse industrialized state. It's interesting. The two gubernatorial candidates don't agree on much, but they seem to agree on reframing data center builds in a way that gives more discernment and more discretion to the communities that are impacted, and making it a better deal for citizens. So I do think there's a lot these capabilities can do. There is an essential nature for us as a country, from an economic, from a ability to sustain our way of life, to be able to advance these capabilities. And that story is not getting across the company level. It's not getting across at the societal level in a way that's probably necessary for where it needs to be today. And by the way, with that needs to go some change behaviors, right? The data center companies could have come in and said, look, I'm not going to drain, and I'm using closed loop on the cooling.
Yeah.
We'll use cameras that don't shine lights. I'll plant those, what are they, the quick skinny trees that grow so you don't see it from your neighboring farm.
Yeah.
And we're going to subsidize your electricity bills because we're going to, we understand that takes and could increase they could have done these things.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, they could have given a what's in it for me for the communities a little better, and
a little bit better before becoming the bad guys and gals.
Yeah, it's like the boogeyman now, and everybody's like, there's this knee jerk reaction, anti-data center, and some of this stuff, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. It gets out there and it takes on a life of its own. Like you said, the closed loop cooling, they don't do evaporative cooling. I mean, we're not taking everybody's water. We're not going to like.
They're data companies. They can measure. They can report on it. They can offset it with benefits. There's a lot that they could be doing. And like I said, you don't need bright, you're sitting there and you're 3 farms away and you don't want to see light. I'm not sure they need bright lights other than for really localized for safety. The security, like military, forward operating bases aren't lighting up everything around them.
Right. Right. They don't
there are other
stadium.
technologies that you can use that allow you to have cameras that work in the dark.
Yeah, I'm sure they could afford a few night vision goggle
There's a lot you
things
could do
for their guards. You could do a lot of stuff. Put everything underground, Okay, now we move on to our final segment of the show, and this is what we call our lightning round. And I don't know if you've listened to the show very much, but this is the meat and potatoes, right? Like this is we've gone through the appetizer. We talked about kind of these trivialties, AI and this silly stuff. Now we're getting to the real conversation. This is the hard hitting questions. There are right and wrong answers. We have a complex algorithm that we use to score it. That takes a few months to run it through the algorithm, and we'll get you your answer eventually. But I don't know what the answers are. It's completely, this is not explainable AI, the algorithm. We don't know.
I'm nervous, man. I'm nervous.
And you should be. I don't want to trivialize this. This is where it gets important, and this is high stakes. So
this is either the day where I realize or lose my dream. So let's get into it.
Right. And if need be, we can cut some of these answers if it becomes detrimental to your business. If you say the wrong thing. So with that, you're prepared.
I'm ready.
Okay. If you were to get a superpower, invisibility or super strength, which one are you leaning towards?
I'd like invisibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever tasted soap?
I grew up in a German Catholic family and society, or in Cincinnati, and when I used bad words like all my friends, yes, we tasted soap. Ivory
Rightly
soap.
So.
Yeah.
Rightly so. But we had to go get graters to get the taste out of our mouth. That's why graters was invented. I think that was actually the impetus for that. When it comes to carbs, you're going for bread, pasta, rice, potatoes. What's your favorite carb? What are you reaching for?
Sourdough bread.
Mm-hmm. Good choice.
Sparingly, but sourdough bread.
Okay. Black beans or refried beans when you're making a burrito.
Well, you can have black refried beans, and that's how you should do
that's
it.
True. That's how you
should.
A
little bit of lime juice, maybe a little bit of chipotle pepper sauce in there, a little salt and pepper. Yeah. That's the answer.
Are you a foodie?
I am. Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah.
That's good. All right. Well, here's a good one then. Do you Instagram your food?
No.
What about, and this one's an interesting one. We've been asking this for a while now of every guest. We try to, if I remember to do it. Do you like the smell of gasoline?
No, I don't.
No?
I don't mind it.
Don't?
But
it's not like you're craving it or anything.
Yeah. I mean, Bed Bath & Beyond comes up with one of those little bathroom air fresheners that you plug in that's gasoline. Yeah, maybe I'll look at it.
Yeah, you consider it.
Yeah.
Okay. A scale of 1 to 10, how good are you at trivia? I feel like you'd be pretty good at trivia.
I'm pretty good at trivia, so give me an 8.
Okay. I like that. Well, how many cups of coffee are you drinking per day?
Regular 4. Decaf, I don't have to count because it's not bad for you.
Okay. You can do it.
I love coffee. There is simple pleasure of a good coffee.
Let's see. 4's a good answer, I feel like.
Yeah, Again, 2 in the morning, 2 in the early afternoon, kind of works out. Yeah.
What was your favorite childhood television program? I don't think that's a security question typically, but I try to steer away. Some of these are security questions. I try to steer away.
I like Tom and Jerry. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah. And they had like kind of the little spin-offs, on Tom and Jerry. Wasn't it the one where like the family of planes that they would do every now and then they'd have different little offshoots of that. Give you a little variety. Gosh, I haven't thought about that cartoon in a long time. What's your favorite type of tea?
Ooh, that's tough. Turkish.
Okay.
How it's prepared, the fact that it could be 11 o'clock at night and you're drinking it with them. The whole ceremony, it's not much of a ceremony, but the whole way they make it, serve it, and how it's the drink for socialization. I think that's cool.
That's
it
a turkey
good too. Yep.
Now, aren't they the ones that do the coffee where it's like they swirl around the little pot in the hot coals or something like that, and it boils in the pot?
I didn't see that, but it was with the tea. From what I was able to see, you'd pour a little bit of the tea, then you'd pour hot water on top of it, and there was a way to do it, and it was usually in a glass, not in a cup.
Nice.
It was fun. It's better there than trying to replicate it here, but that is by far my favorite.
Okay. What's the fastest speed you've ever driven in a car?
120. I was in high school.
Not bad. Yeah. We all did something like that in high school.
It was not good judgment.
No. But you're not expected to in high school.
No.
All right. We'll end on this one. How many hours of sleep do you typically need in a night?
I have to get at least 5. I'm usually in the 6 to 7.
6 to 7. Not bad. Respectable. Okay. Well, that does it for the lightning round. Feel good about this one. I do.
Yeah.
In close, do you have anything coming up? Are you releasing a book? Or are you going to be speaking at a conference? Does your company have anything big coming up? Anything like that you've got coming up? Yeah,
I've got some exciting papers that will be coming out, looking to publish. I publish through Forbes and Fast Company pretty frequently, but I've been doing a collaboration that I'm pretty excited about. I'm not ready to talk about it yet, but it's about the thing that people aren't thinking about when it comes to AI, and it's really unique in that it brings like my perspective as an AI operator, but it also brings this expert known for her perspective on business architectures, and I think we have something that's compelling. Also, have flying next week to a large supply chain gathering for I can't get into it much, but I'm excited about the opportunity to spend some time with a group of leaders and walking with them over a few days on AI. So there's always exciting. The book I co-authored one, came out earlier this year. It was exciting. It was a Amazon category bestseller here and in the
Nice.
Netherlands. So I've got the bug. I just need the time to figure out. Next one probably won't be co-authored, but it was a good way to lean in. So we've got some cool things going on.
Was your co-author from the Netherlands? Is that why it was
No,
popular there?
no, it was a group of us, and why it hit in the Netherlands, I don't know. Thank you.
It just resonated there. That's okay. That's fantastic. Yeah. Okay, so if folks want to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to reach out?
So 2 ways. One, find me on LinkedIn. A great way to do it. The other is my company website. It's Aurora Insights LLC.com. And I've got a lot of my published content there, a little bit what we do from an organization, and just launched a exciting executive program working with leadership teams around AI understanding and a session that leads to an ability to go after real value in partnership with United States Artificial Intelligence Institute. So excited about that as well. So there's a lot there.
Yeah. Oh, man. You got a lot going on. Any closing thoughts? Any parting wisdom?
Yeah. I think, there's probably a few things that I would say. First of all, I really want to, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed talking to you, James, and thanks for having me on the pod. I'll leave the audience with probably 2 big thoughts, right? And I think one is the days of making AI investments where you don't see and achieve a meaningful return are over. And the second, this is actually an example I wrote about in the book, is, as I mentioned, in the Coast Guard, when you're at sea, you learn pretty early in your career that if you're too aggressive and reckless, you're going to get into big trouble quick. But what you also learn, and it's not quite as acute a problem in business, but you also learn that if you are too reserved in your decision making, you run the risk of waiting too long. That can be equally as treacherous and deadly for sailors as it can for businesses. So, if you're in a position where you're not sure what to do or how it's going to impact you, the safe strategy is not to wait and see how it plays out, but to educate yourself, engage, and start to lean in. The good news, once you start leaning in, there's nothing prevents you from catching up and differentiating yourself in the market based on it. So with that said, those are the 2 I'll leave everyone with, and appreciate, like I said, appreciate being on here. And if you're interested, feel free to reach out. Would love to continue the dialogue.
Yeah, I really, again, thank you for coming on. We really, it was a great conversation. I mean, I think you sat with me. I was happy that you sat down with me at the AI Week thing. I think we sat for like an hour. You just yapped.
That was really cool.
Yeah, I really
we'll
appreciate it. We'll
have to get together again face to face here as we get, maybe once things settle down as we get into the fall, but I'd love to grab a coffee.
Yeah, absolutely. Or some Graders or something. I think they have coffee at Graders. So we could
there we go. Yeah. Call it breakfast, lunch, and dinner that day.
I feel like your second insight, that whole, don't go too slow, don't go too fast. I feel like that's a book. I feel like that's a book waiting to be written there.
Well, that's a chapter. That's a chapter I wrote in the AI shift. So that's okay. And it's funny how the lessons early in career, even in different environments, start to help you shape the patterns that you're seeing today. So that was a good example for me. Yeah,
I just like the books. Like, what was it? Turn the Ship Around. That was one of my favorite books. I like maritime books for some reason, I guess. I don't know.
It's adventurous.
All right. Well, if you'd like to get in touch with us here at the /, drop us a line at the / at Calibrity.com. See you next time. The / podcast is created by Calibrity. The / team is director and producer Ryan Wilson, editing by Steve Baradelli, marketing support by Taylor Blessing, and I'm your host, James Carman. Thanks for listening.